perfection. You gave your life for us. We are amazed. We stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us.
You lead me home in your presence where I belong. You called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love?
From the heights of heaven, you stepped down to earth. Innocent perfection, you gave your life for us. We are amazed. We stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. Yeah. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us.
How great is the goodness you have stored up for those who fear you. You lavish it on those who come to you for protection, blessing them before the watching world. You hide them in the shelter of your presence, safe from those who conspire against them. You shelter them in your presence, far from accusing tongues. Praise the Lord, for he has shown me the wonders of his unfailing love.
Who am I that the highest was lost, but he brought me his love for me. His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, He has ransomed His grace was. And while I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Yes, I'm chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. My Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
Let's sing this together.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
This next song that we're going to do is going to be new here for Watermark. It's been around for a while, and it's a song that has taught me quite a few things. One of them being surrender, and learning that no matter what situation I'm in or what my circumstances, that my response always needs to be the same. That I always need to look up and to trust God who's holding my life and guiding my life. And it's just been an encouragement to me that we can do that and we can trust in him even when things are really good and when things are really bad and hard. And then the second part of the chorus says, I will look back and see that you've been faithful, and I'll look ahead and believe that you are able. And that's just been something that I've been able to use to strengthen my faith, being able to look back on my life and see all the ways that God has been faithful and be encouraged that he will continue to be. So just think about these words as we sing them today and sing them into your heart.
All the worries of this world, I will lay them at your feet. Surrender every anxious thought for perfect peace, your perfect peace. And all the loved ones I hold dear, all my hopes and dreams and all my fears, I will choose to trust your name in everything, with everything. I will look out, for there is none above you. I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. I will take you at your word. For Jesus, you have taken hold of me. All my life is in your hands. You are my strength. You are my strength. I will look up, for there is none above you. I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. I will look back and see that you are faithful. I look ahead, believing you are able, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of Prince of Peace, perfect healer, all my life, all my cares on you, King of Kings, mighty Savior, all my life, all my cares on you, Prince of Peace, perfect healer, all my life, all
your love, that you would become flesh and be among us and welcome us in and show us the way home and be our Lord. I pray that whatever we're experiencing today, we could say those words and know them to be true, that we could more than believe in an absent belief, but a true 100% all-in belief that you are Lord of all. We thank you and we love you, and we pray that your perfect peace would be amongst us today. In your name, amen. You guys can sit down, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm okay with whatever you do. Well, we are so happy that you guys are here to gather with us today. If we've never met before, my name's Jesse. I'm a ministry resident here at Watermark, and I help lead our young adult group called Common Life. So if you happen to be a young adult, you are welcome to join us. I'll let you define the term on your own, because I don't want to constrain anybody. But big things happening next week. Next Sunday is my favorite day of the year. I think it should be an annual holiday. It's the annual Soup and Chili Cook-Off. That's a big, woo! Yeah! You get to come here at 6 p.m. next Sunday night, and if you like making soup or chili, or you're good at buying a pizza, because sometimes people just bring pizza, because kids don't like soup sometimes. But you can sign up and be part of our little Soup and Chili Cook-Off competition. There are prizes for the best soup and chili. And before you think you might not win, because Steve Durr always wins, he's not entering this year. So everyone has a chance. And if somehow he still rigs it to be for him, then we're going to have a talk with him. But Soup and Chili Cook-Off next Sunday night. It's a great time to just gather together as a community, eat really good food. There's competition, so who doesn't love competition? And it's just a really fun night together as a faith family. And a great way to sign up for that stuff and find information is at wm.church. That's just, instead of a .com, it's a .church. So that's easy to remember. So you can do it on your phone. You can do it on a computer. We have an iPad in the back that you can go to and check things out. And a great time to do that is this next segment of time we're going to called Life Together. Life Together is this cool time where we get to break from the normal church pattern, and we can hang out. You can grab some drink like tea, coffee, water. There's snacks in the back. You can worship God through giving at one of our giving areas by the door. Or if you're new, you can go to the welcome area. We'd love to meet you. Even if you're not new, you can go to the welcome area, and we'd still like to talk to you. It's open to all. But Life Together is about 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll call you back then. Thanks.
welcome back. Thanks, everybody. My name is Jeff, and I'm going to be sharing with us today as we continue our way through the book of Genesis. And I was thinking this week a little bit about some times that I have really blown it in my life. Have you ever blown it? Like, big time. Like, seriously, there's at least one other person in here, thank you, who has blown it in your life. You know those memories that you kind of replay, and like anytime you like start to feel good about yourself, and you're like, oh, I got that one that I can pull out and replay that one in my mind. That'll knock me down a few notches. That's pretty good. One time that I was trying to decide what to share with you this morning, there was one time when I was young. I remember, I don't even know how old I was, maybe junior high. We were at like this church picnic thing. All the adults were sitting at this picnic table. So picture this picnic table, kind of going lengthwise like this. And I was off to the side of it. My friend and I, we were playing soccer. And for some reason, I don't know why, he kind of lobbed the ball to me. And I thought, I'm going to kick it like just under the table. And it's going to like roll right under their feet. And for some reason, I thought that'll be awesome. And I kind of kicked it, and I misjudged it a little bit. It didn't go under the table. It bounced onto the table where people were eating and like rolled, and like in a movie, where it like goes down and does a tremendous amount of damage to everything and everybody. That's exactly what it did. And there's the guy at the end, and he was taking a drink of a can, and it hit him, and it hit his, like, chipped his tooth, and he was really mad. And I was just a kid, and I was like freaking out. And I didn't know what to do. And it was one of those, like, I really want to apologize, but he's really, really mad. And like, hey, I'm a kid. You shouldn't be so mad at me. But he was. And so, like, it's one of those scenes that I can still kind of replay, seeing the ball bouncing and doing damage to people. And I chipped a guy's tooth. My friend and I, like, as young boys do, it became something that he reminded me about often in our life, in our friendship. And every now and then we would bring up, anytime something came up or we got into an argument, he would be like, hey, do you remember when you chipped that one guy's tooth? And I say, yes, I remember that. I remember that terrible, terrible time. And it might be like something I can kind of look back on, with at least a little bit of humor. But sometimes when we blow it, it's not because of a mistake that we made. Exactly. It's not because we forgot to do something, or it's not because we misjudged something. Sometimes it's just because we made the totally wrong decision, right? Sometimes you make a decision and then things turn out like the opposite of what you intended. Or maybe you made a call and it was the best call that you could make, and maybe you made it on limited information and limited time available, and it turned out to be the wrong one. And it strikes me that we all, as people, as humans, we are capable of making really terrible decisions. We all have that capacity within us to make really terrible decisions. And they're not all ones that you can look back on and kind of laugh. Sometimes really terrible decisions have life-altering consequences beyond a chipped tooth. Sometimes our decisions affect other people more than they affect us. That certainly did in my case. And that's going to be a theme for us today as we continue on here in the book of Genesis. We're going to get into kind of this weird story, all right? It's found in chapter 20. If you've been reading along or if you've been listening along in the podcast, we covered it, I think, just this last week. And you come across some parts of the story in the book of Genesis, and you're like, what the heck did I just read? Right? You had that experience, you're reading along, especially in the Old Testament and the first few books of the Bible, and you're like, what was that? Right? I mean, get used to that feeling, because we're going to experience it a few more times before we're done. But Genesis 20 is one of those times, and I've really enjoyed listening to our podcast whenever a passage around this topic comes up, because the people who are doing the podcast keep saying, what in the world is this? What is this? This is so messed up. And that's because it really is messed up. There is so much messed up stuff in the Bible like this because people, we are messed up and we're capable of making really bad decisions. So here's the story that we're going to get into. It's Genesis chapter 20, and we're following along in Abraham's life. We're actually going to jump back a little bit. This is before his son Isaac was born. We talked about that a little bit last week, and this is kind of an in-between story. So it says, Abraham moved south to the Negev and lived for a while between Kadesh and Shur, and then he moved on to Gerar. While living there as a foreigner, Abraham introduced his wife Sarah by saying, "She is my sister." So King Abimelech of Gerar sent for Sarah and had her brought to him at his palace. Okay, so first of all, ew, right? Like, I have some friends in college who, right after school, they did some touring and playing music together. They're a husband and wife. They're both very young looking. And so as they toured and played music, people used to assume that they were brother and sister because they had the same last name. And she would always make a point of saying at any of their shows, yeah, we're husband and wife. I just want you to let you know that because some people think we're brother and sister. And when you're married and people think you're brother and sister, that makes you feel icky. It's not a good thing, right? It's not a good feeling at all. So this whole concept that Abraham says, she's my sister, I don't know. That doesn't feel good when we read that, right? It doesn't feel good when I read that. And I think, what is it that Abraham is really hoping to gain here? Like, and we might go the route of saying, well, you know, it's a different culture, and maybe like the way that they did things back then and in a different culture and a different time, maybe they're going to do things that don't make sense to us, but they're really not all that unusual. And so maybe you're thinking, is this like one of those things? Is this just like this was kind of okay in this part of the world at this time? The problem is when we read on in the story, as we're going to, nobody else in the story seems to think that this is normal. Like there's not anybody else that we're going to read who's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's also been suggested that possibly what Abraham was thinking is that if he was traveling with his sister and she attracted some attention from the men of the area where they're traveling, like he would kind of be her protector, and they would have to go through him, basically, if they wanted to court her or marry her. They wouldn't be able to just sweep in and take her. So, like, maybe they'd be able to keep up this deception for a little bit longer. So, losing her to the king, somebody who kind of bypassed those normal rules, maybe that wasn't something that Abraham had planned on. And, like, I don't know, maybe you could make that claim, except for one small detail. One small detail. And that was, this is the second time he's done this. If you go back to Genesis chapter 12, Abraham did the exact same thing. Different place, different king, but same results. This is what it says. Let's go back to Genesis 12 just to get some context. It says, at that time there was a severe famine struck the land of Canaan, forcing Abram. This was before the name change. Okay, Abram changed his name to Abraham. So we've jumped back to before that happened. Forcing Abram to go down to Egypt, where he lived as a foreigner. As he was approaching the border of Egypt, Abram said to his wife Sarai, "Look, you are a very beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife. Let's kill him, then we can have her.' So please tell them you are my sister. They will spare my life and treat me well because of their interest in you." If you listened to the podcast on Genesis 12, Kristen and Andrea did this podcast, and I loved their comment. Abraham's a jerk, is what they kept saying. Man, what a jerk. And yeah, it's kind of a jerk move, right? What we do get from this passage is we get to see some of Abraham's motivation here. He's afraid for his life. He thinks he's going to be killed. And, you know, getting treated well, maybe that's just kind of a side benefit. That's not really what he was after. He's just hoping to not die. Remember, Abraham is kind of a wanderer at this point. He's kind of a nomad. He's kind of a nobody coming through town. He doesn't have a lot of possessions at this point, and he's thinking, if I just show up with my wife, I'm pretty defenseless for the most part. So why wouldn't they just kill me and take her? And I don't know, maybe that's a valid concern. I mean, maybe he wants to make sure that she's taken care of, and so he's trying to protect her. I mean, maybe not. I mean, it's kind of, if somebody says, hey, give me your wallet, and you think, well, I don't want you to take it from me, so here, I'll give it to you, then you can't take it from me. That's kind of the Abraham strategy here, just so I don't get hurt in the process. But a wife is not a piece of property like that, is she? I mean, it seems like she probably ought to be protected a little bit more than that, doesn't it? And I mean, that's the part that really sits really badly with us. The part that Abraham seems to be missing here that we really need him to see. Because to our modern sensibilities, this is really insulting and it's really disgusting, quite honestly. Like, that's your wife. That's your wife. You don't treat her like she's just a piece of property. You don't treat her so casually that it's like, well, it's fine if you lose her. I mean, you'll be fine. You'll do just fine without her. We know that that's not how it's supposed to work. And Abraham seems to be treating her that way, and he sounds like a jerk. The king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, seems to agree with us, by the way, because after he took Sarah as his wife, he gave Abraham all kinds of riches, and then he found himself cursed by God for taking another man's wife. And this is what he says. What have you done to me? He demanded. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister and allow me to take her as my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and get out of here. Pharaoh ordered some of his men to escort them, and he sent Abram out of the country along with his wife and all his possessions. So, just to recap the experience that he had in Egypt, Abraham lies. He says Sarah is his sister. Pharaoh takes her as a wife. He gives Abraham wealth for her. But then when the Pharaoh gets cursed, Abraham and Sarah are kicked out of Egypt. They are literally escorted out of the country. It's like getting fired from your job and like, hey, security is here. They're going to escort you out, right? And don't even think about stepping foot in Egypt again, okay? You are banned from Egypt. Okay, so with that little bit of backstory, let's get back to Genesis 20. Abram's defense of, I didn't mean for all this to happen, it doesn't really hold up very well once that we know that this has already happened to him before. If it happened before, it's probably going to happen again. So, back in chapter 20, Abimelech has taken Sarah as his wife. But, verse 3, it says, that night God came to Abimelech in a dream and told him, you are a dead man, for that woman you have taken is already married. Now, we don't get a lot of details about the incident in Egypt. But here we find that God is visiting this ruler, Abimelech, in a dream. And he's confronting him directly about Sarah. And I think that this is fascinating. And the reason is because I really want to know how this went down. Like, does Abimelech even know who God is? Is he even aware of who this is that's visiting him in a dream and that's speaking to him? Or was this some totally foreign God that he's never heard of appearing to him in a dream? Because that alone would absolutely freak me out. I mean, that would be terrifying. To be confronted by God this directly. And if this was his very first encounter with God, hey, Abimelech, hey, I'm God. By the way, you're dead. That's terrifying. God comes to the king and he is upset. But Abimelech, verse 4, it says, Abimelech had not slept with her yet, so he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Didn't Abraham tell me she's my sister? And she herself said, yes, he's my brother. I acted in complete innocence. My hands are clean. And the Bible makes a point of telling us that nothing inappropriate has happened between Abimelech and Sarah. And that should hopefully make us feel a little bit better for her at least, not necessarily for Abraham. But Abimelech responds the same way that probably any of us would, to say, hey, I had no idea. I had no idea. They both said that they were brother and sister, so I acted in good conscience. In verse 6, in the dream, God responded, yes, I know you are innocent. That's why I kept you from sinning against me and why I did not let you touch her. Now return the woman to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet, then you will live. But if you don't return her to him, you can be sure that you and all your people will die. Okay. A couple of things that I think are worth pointing out here. Number one, and I think that it might have been John and Tracy did a podcast on this text, and I think they might have pointed out, if Abraham was not looking out for Sarah, if Abraham was not protecting Sarah, God still was, right? If Abraham wasn't looking after his own wife, God was still looking after her and protecting her. Abraham might not have valued Sarah as much as he should have. He might have treated her more as something that could be lost, but God knew her value and protected her. God once again shows how much he values women in general and Sarah in particular in the pages of the Old Testament. In a culture, in a society that didn't necessarily value women, God continues to uphold women in his story and with their value. It happens in unexpected ways all over the pages of Scripture. And once you recognize it, and once you see that, you start to see it happening everywhere. Like, wow, God really values her. It's going to happen again in the next chapter in regard to Sarah's servant, actually. So that's one thing that's worth noting. Here's the other thing. I'm really struck by this idea that Abimelech needs to go ask Abraham to pray for him. Did you notice that? God says, you need to go, give her back to her husband. He will pray for you because he's a prophet, and then you will live. And I am just not really okay with that. That whole concept that Abimelech did nothing wrong, right? Abraham is a liar, but Abimelech is the one that's in trouble, and he needs to go ask the guy who lied to pray for him. It just feels really backwards to me. And maybe I'm thinking of it like as a dad, because if a couple of my kids are having, a thing, and one is lying and tricked the other one, I'm not going to go to the one who was tricked and say, all right, now you need to go apologize. You believed him, right? I wouldn't do that, probably. I don't know. I like to keep them on their toes. Abimelech, you need to go to Abraham and have him pray for you. And I think, pray for what? Like, pray for forgiveness? Like, hey, man, sorry, I believed you. Won't do that again. You tricked me into thinking this thing was okay, and it wasn't. So, I don't know. It doesn't sit real well with me. Shouldn't Abraham be asking Abimelech to pray for him? I mean, isn't that how it should go? Because Abimelech, he didn't do anything wrong, did he? And then I think, well, I don't know. Maybe it's not quite as simple as that. We tend to take intent into consideration, right? And as well we should. We take intent into consideration whether somebody is guilty or not. I mean, if I act with pure motives and with all the information that I have available to me, I can't be guilty of doing wrong, can I? Or can I? Are there circumstances, are there situations where I could be guilty of doing something wrong even if I act in good intentions? Can you really, really blow it by accident, even when you thought you were doing the right thing? When we were in college, one of my older brothers got a speeding ticket, and he decided he's going to fight the ticket. I think that's interesting. I'd never seen anybody fight a ticket. So I rode with him to go to court, and it was in some little town, like he was just passing through. He got a speeding ticket. You got to go back and appear where you got the ticket. And the speedometer in his car did not work, and so he went to an auto place and got an estimate to repair it and got them like certification that it's broken. And so he brought this with him. He's going to go back and fight the ticket. And so we were in the courtroom, and the judge is talking about all the things that it's just people entering pleas that day. And he talked about tickets. And he said, for traffic violations, just want to make you aware, we are not concerned with intent in this courtroom. We are only concerned with whether you did it or not. My brother's balloon kind of deflated a little bit. We're not concerned with intent, only if it happened. Did your speedometer lie to you? Sorry, we don't care. The fact is, you were speeding. You broke the law whether you meant to or not. A few weeks ago, I got a parking ticket. I am 42 years old. I have never gotten a parking ticket in all my years of driving and parking successfully. But I was in Ann Arbor a few weeks ago, and I don't know, took my kids to the Children's Museum, had a great day, came out, there's a parking ticket on my car. What the heck? Well, did I leave my meter, unpaid? No. Did I park in a no parking zone or a loading zone? No. Do you know what my infraction was? I backed into the parking space. I know. Terrible, right? I backed into my parking space. I didn't know you couldn't do that. Apparently you can't in some places. There was a sign somewhere that I probably should have seen that said, "Don't back into the stall." Like, what's a stall? Is that, you mean space? If they meant space, why didn't they write space? And then I am also thinking, I can't get my head around why I can't back into this parking spot. That makes no sense to me. I've already done it. I'm just going to leave it there, and it'll be fine. Guess what? I got a parking ticket in Ann Arbor. I'm still a little bit angry about it. I don't know if you can tell. I can't comprehend how a person could get a parking ticket for backing into a parking space that you legally have parked in, right? Guess what? Doesn't matter if I understand it or not. I broke the law whether I understood the law or not. To Abimelech, you say, you took a woman who is not yours. She's not yours. She doesn't belong to you. She's married to someone else. And it doesn't matter if you meant to or not. You are guilty. That it stings a little bit, I feel like. If you have an affair with a person who's married, but you didn't know about it, you didn't know they were married, they lied to you about being married, think about it this way. Are there still consequences for that? Are there still consequences even if you acted in good faith? Man, absolutely there are, right? For everybody involved. Everybody. It's a ripple effect of consequences. It's huge. And you could say, I never meant for this to happen. I never intended to get involved in something like this. I never would have if I had known. And that might help. And it might help you feel better. But you're still going to say, I'm so sorry, aren't you? I'm so sorry. Abimelech has a clean conscience. He acted in good faith, but he's still guilty. And man, it reminds me, we can blow it with a clear conscience. We can blow it with the best of intentions by trusting the wrong person. And so Abimelech has to go to the prophet and ask him to pray so that he can live. This is what Abimelech did. In verse 8 it says, Abimelech got up early the next morning and quickly called his servants together. When he told them what had happened, his men were terrified. Then Abimelech called for Abraham. What have you done to us, he demanded. What crime have I committed that deserves treatment like this, making me and my kingdom guilty of this great sin? No one should ever do what you have done. Whatever possessed you to do such a thing? I love that last line because I use that all my time on my kids. What were you thinking? Notice the first verse, though. Abimelech woke up. He told his people about the dream, and they were afraid, right? They were afraid. Remember that. We're going to come back to it. It's going to be important. Abimelech's response is very predictable, I think. He says things like, what were you thinking? Look what you did to us. Why would you do something like that? And I'm expecting, when I ask my kids, what were you thinking? The response I normally get, I don't know, right? I don't know. You weren't thinking. Like, I'm expecting Abimelech to come to Abraham. What were you thinking? I don't know. There's not much chance that we can appeal to culture here to say that Abraham acted reasonably, like, oh, maybe in his day and age this was okay. No. According to Abimelech's response, he says, you have done something you should have never have done. No one should do what you've done. He's appalled by it. Abraham's answer, verse 11. Abraham replied, I thought, this is a godless place. They will want my wife and they will kill me to get her. There's more to his answer, but I want to pause here for just a minute before we go on. Because we heard the part about how he's afraid that they're going to kill him and take his wife, right? That was part of his reasoning in Egypt as well. That was what this whole thing was based on. But the first part of his answer, why does he think that these people are going to do that? Because he says, this is a godless place. This is a godless place. Now, we're reading from the New Living Translation called the NLT. We like to use that translation because it's really clear, really good English, really easy to understand. Sometimes, in order to make it really good English, you have to smooth over some expressions, okay? What Abraham says here is not, this is a godless place. He doesn't use the term godless place. What he says literally is, there is no fear of God in this place. It means the same thing, right? There's no fear of God means they don't care about God. Nobody is really worried about God. They don't think about God at all. It's a godless place. It means the exact same thing. It's just a little bit smoother English-wise. Except when he says, there is no fear of God in this place. Do you remember what Abimelech did right after his dream? It says that he woke up and he went and told his people what had happened, and they were what? They were terrified. They were afraid. Same word, actually. Same exact word that Abraham used. No fear of God. They woke up and they were afraid. So, for a place where there's not really any fear of God, I don't know, Abraham, it seems like you might have misjudged them a little bit. I wonder if we ever do that. Just in general, you know, like we think, I don't know, these people I'm talking to are my neighbors or my coworkers or my family, whatever, like they don't care what God thinks about this. I don't want to share my perspective. They don't want to hear about how God has me on this journey. They don't want to hear that spiritual kind of talk. I don't want to bring up Jesus. They wouldn't understand. It's not something they want to hear about. It's like if I'm around my non-Christian coworkers and neighbors, it's best just to blend in. Like there's no sense in standing out, doing anything that calls attention to my belief in God. I'll just keep that part to myself in this conversation because there's no fear of God in this place. And I don't know. Maybe we should try them and see. Maybe we might find that there is more fear of God than we think. Back to Abraham's excuse. In verse 12, he says, she really is my sister, for we both have the same father but different mothers, and I married her. When God called me to leave my father's home and travel from place to place, I told her, do me a favor, wherever we go, tell the people that I am your brother. So it turns out this is a half-truth. Half-truth. And Abraham kind of offers that as a way to get him off the hook. It doesn't help, right? His intent was to deceive. His intent was to mislead. And I feel really bad for Abimelech in this story. I really do. He gets taken in by this, feels like a con man, a drifter who comes through town and sells him on this story about how he's really just on this road trip with his sister. And because Abimelech has no choice but to do as he's told, Abraham has put him in a terrible spot. And so he does what he has to do. He appeals to Abraham, who prays for him. And then he pays Abraham and like as a way to get it off of his conscience. And he even says to Sarah in verse 16, I think this is kind of hilarious. He says to Sarah, look, I'm giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver in the presence of these witnesses to compensate you for any wrong I may have done. This has settled a claim against me. Your reputation is cleared. Again, John and Tracy did the podcast. I loved when they talked about this because they were like, oh, Abraham is profiting from it. He's winning. Like he's getting wealthier off of this. That just feels so wrong. And a lot has been said about Abraham's lack of faith in these times. And just think about that for a minute, because Abraham is a guy who's listed in the New Testament as an absolute hero of faith. He is a hero of faith. There's this whole like faith hall of fame in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. Abraham is like top billing on that list. Man, if you want to see what faith looks like, look at Abraham. If you want to see what true, real trust and following God looks like, you look at Abraham. And yet, he passed this huge test of faith we talked about last week regarding his son Isaac. Then where was this faith that God was going to see him through in Egypt and in Gerar? Where was the faith that God was going to bring him through to finish what he'd started in Abraham and in Sarah? How can a guy with so much faith act out of so much fear? When Abraham, in part of his explanation, right, he said, she's my half sister. In verse 13, he said, when God called me to leave my father's home and travel from place to place. When God called me to leave, this is your last translation note for the day. God called me to leave is probably the most positive way that we could say that. The term that Abraham used is actually when God made me wander. Literally, God made me wander. It's a word that is used often in the Old Testament, never positively. It is never a positive word. Other ways that word is translated, led astray, seduced, deceived. Part of Abraham's blame shifting in all of this is to say, God, you brought this on me. You brought me to this. I'm in this mess because of you. I'm in this discomfort because of you. You could have brought me to wherever we're going by now, but instead you're making me wander. There's almost this bitterness in his tone when we look at it that way. So if I'm going to wander, it's not what I want, it's what God wants, then I guess I'm going to have to protect myself. It's really easy to fall into that way of thinking, right? And when we operate out of fear of the unknown, fear of what might happen or things that we might find, operating out of fear, we tend to make choices that are based on that fear. And then what happens? Everybody else ends up dealing with the consequences of our choices. Our mistrust, our fear has implications for everyone around us. Abraham, and he blew it. He reacted in fear. He moved to protect instead of moving to bless. And Abimelech and his whole household, they paid the price for Abraham's fear. If we opened our Bible and this was the only chapter that we read, this was the only thing we'd ever heard about Abraham, we might think, man, this is a really bad guy. But he wasn't a bad guy. That's the thing, not according to the Bible. And because as frustrating as it sounds from just this one little piece of Abraham's life, God continued to bless him. He made mistakes. I mean, maybe he had a habit of making mistakes, but God also continued to bless him. And as much as it might drive us crazy because it seemed like he profited from this whole mess, I suspect that he probably didn't see it that way. It probably didn't feel that way to him. It would appear that God is not as limited by our stupid choices as we are. That's what it would seem like. And I don't want to just excuse people who do bad things, right? I mean, it's not like, oops, no big deal. I didn't know how fast I was driving. I think that sometimes we do a real disservice to ourselves and to the people we hurt if we just brush it off too quickly. It's not like, well, I'm sorry, so now you have to forgive me because you have to show grace. Like, especially, and we've seen this, right, in the world. We've seen this in the culture around us, people in positions of power who hurt other people. And it's real tempting to just want to kind of like smooth over that and say, okay, hey, all is forgiven, all is good, it's grace, let's restore everybody. And sometimes we need to not rush to reinstate someone just because we want to show grace. What we should be doing is slowing down and letting ourselves be uncomfortable with what happened for a little bit longer. And there are some things, understand fully, there are some things where it's kind of one strike and you're out, aren't there? There are things in the world and in the culture around us when we think about things like sexual assault, right? Those aren't really like apologize and reconcile kind of things, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I don't want to diminish that pain or say, hey, it's not a big deal, because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. But I also know that there are times and there are things where you and I have blown it, right? I know that's true. I know that's true of me. I'm only guessing that that's true for you. There have been times that you've been called to live by faith, but like Abraham, you reacted more out of fear. There are times when you made decisions that hurt people and maybe even had life-altering consequences. And for you and for me, like, I have to believe that people can learn, can't they? I have to believe that. And the reason I have to believe that is because I need to believe that I can learn from my mistakes. And it doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't mean that everything goes back to normal. As a matter of fact, the next time we hear from Abimelech, it's in the next chapter. He comes to Abraham, and I love this. He says, Abimelech says to Abraham, God is obviously with you, helping you in everything you do. Swear to me in God's name that you will never deceive me, my children, or any of my descendants. Hey, Abraham, like, since we're going to have this relationship together, let's have an agreement here. Don't lie to me. Swear you will never deceive me. He didn't say again. I might have. Like, if we're going to have this relationship, we need to have an understanding. Don't lie to me. Abraham seems to have this thing hanging over his head, right? Like, hey, you're the guy who lied. So I have to deal with you. You're living in my land, but I'm not sure if I trust you. That's fair, isn't it? Do you know anybody like that? It's like, yeah, you know, I'm not sure if I trust you or not, but I'm going to stay on your good side. I have a relationship with you in some terms, but there's boundaries. There's definite boundaries there, and that's how it's going to be because I don't know if I trust you. Right? Do you know people in your life like that? Abraham kind of earned that. He earned that relationship. You definitely think twice about dealing with them. He says, don't lie to me or my children. And Abraham promises. Interesting footnote. Many years later, after Abraham has died and his son Isaac has grown and has a family, he travels through this region. And the name Abimelech is kind of like Pharaoh. It actually means father of the king, Avimelech. And so it's a name that was probably passed down. So the Abimelech that we meet in Genesis 26 is probably the son of the Abimelech that we had in Genesis 20. And it says, Isaac moved to Gerar, where Abimelech, king of the Philistines, lived. When the men who lived there asked Isaac about his wife Rebekah, he said, she is my sister. He was afraid to say, she's my wife. He thought, they will kill me to get her because she's so beautiful. And I'm just like father, like son, right? Sometimes we make choices and those consequences extend far beyond ourselves, even to our children, right? We talk about just blowing it. And to me, there's no greater example of that than being a parent. Because I feel like I'm blowing it all the time, right? As a dad trying to raise kids, it's like, oh my goodness, how much damage am I going to do to these little people? So many things that you've thought and that you've said that you wish you could just like take back or wish you could do it differently. Opportunities missed, right? And there's so many times that as a parent, I just feel like, oh man, I'm blowing it. It's true in a lot of areas. I mean, it's just sometimes it's hard. My wife and I are foster parents, and man, that's hard. That's hard. And there are so many times I feel like, man, we're the worst. Like, I'm the worst foster parent ever. I'm just blowing it. And there are so many days that it's just hard. Actually, Katie just took a new job. She's doing recruitment for foster care now. And we had a really, really bad day and a really rough weekend. And she went to her interview, and they were like, why do you want this job? She's like, I don't know, I hate foster care. Like, man, that's how we feel sometimes. And sometimes we feel like we're just blowing it. Are you familiar with the expression, well, here, fill in the blank. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing right or well. G.K. Chesterton suggested that we should fill that blank in with the word badly. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. Now, what does that mean? It means sometimes we are paralyzed by the fear that we're going to do it wrong. Sometimes we're paralyzed by this fear that whatever we do, it's not going to be good enough. We should wait. We should let somebody else do it. Let a professional handle it. Let somebody else, step in who can do it right. Let's do it right. And he said, I don't think that's the case. I think that there are many things that if it's worth doing it badly. It's worth making the mistakes along the way. There are so many Sundays, guys, honestly, like coming to lead worship. There are Sundays where I'm just like, I'm a mess, man. I'm just struggling, and maybe like I feel sick, or like emotionally I'm struggling, and I'm thinking I can't do it. And honestly, this thought often is the thing that helps me come out here and lead worship on Sundays. Like, I'm thinking, this is going to be bad. This is going to be so bad. And that's how I feel. And sometimes, like, coming out to teach, I feel, oh, man, I've prepared a message. I'm like, oh, this is going to be so bad. If it's worth doing, there's something valuable in it. If it's worth doing, maybe it's actually worth doing it badly. Like, Abraham might have been ticked at God for making him wander, but at least he went. He went. We think, I don't want to do it with the wrong motives. Hey, if I'm doing the right thing, let's do it. Abimelech might have been ticked at Abraham for lying to him, but he got an encounter with the living God, and who knows how that might have changed things for him. And we think, I don't want to talk about my faith with people, right? Because I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to blow it. Yep. You are. I don't want to let people know that I'm a Christian, because what if they see me doing something wrong? What if I blow it? Yep. You're going to. It's going to happen. But maybe it's one of those things that's worth doing. And maybe it's one of those things that's worth doing badly. Because at least we're doing it. Right? If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. Your faith is worth doing. Worship, coming and being a part of worship, that, man, it doesn't matter if you can't sing or you're like, I don't know, I'm not really into these songs. Like, it doesn't matter. It's worth doing it badly. And I cling to that, people. I really do. Prayer is worth doing badly. I don't know how many people I've heard say, I don't know, I can't pray, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Man, if it's worth it, if it's worth doing at all, it is worth making the mistakes along the way, and it is worth blowing it from time to time. We're gonna close up with a time of communion, and this is a celebration to us that God doesn't look at us through our mistakes. He doesn't look at us through our faults. He doesn't look at us through our weaknesses. Because Jesus went to the cross and died on our behalf, and he took all of that for us. When God looks at you, he sees his child because of what Jesus did. That's what we're going to celebrate. Because even if we blow it, we know we have hope, right? We have hope. So if you don't feel like you deserve it, you don't feel like you're worth it, you don't feel like you're going to do it right, I want to encourage you. This is worth doing. So let's do it badly together. Let's pray. God, I want to pray for all my friends, and I pray that they blow it in big ways so that they can see how much you love them through that. God, make us a community of grace. Make us a community that follows you through the good times and the mistakes. And may we see you through all of it in your name. Amen.
Please feel free to stand and participate in communion. If you feel that God is challenging you this week with something, use this time to meet with God and to give that to him. Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? As I walk now through the valley, let your love rise above every fear. Like the sun shaping the shadow, in my weakness your glory appears. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Not for a minute was I forsaken. The is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
Father, thank you for meeting us. And thank you for giving us the openness to ask you to meet us again. I pray that where we're at, you would show up, that we would be afraid, that we would follow even when we might not want to, that even if we grumble, we show up, because it's when we show up that you show up too. We love you, and I pray that just the truth of who you are would resonate with us and be with us this week as we go out and live our lives, that you would be there even when we're not enough. In your name, amen. Well, thank you so much for gathering with us today. And if you're in need of prayer or just need someone to talk to, we have our prayer partners up in the front. They've got the orange tags, so they're easy to spot. And yeah, you're welcome to come up and talk, ask for prayer, ask questions, whatever it is that you might be in need of. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks.